And I'll say this too, like, I'm continually surprised by our loot. Like, I'm doing a complete playthrough right now, 100% playthrough of the game. I played this game like 1,000 hours. No, I love it. We have a great game on our hands, but that's a different thing. But I'll pick up, a new gun and fire it. And I'll be like, whoa, I haven't seen that effect yet. And then I think about that. Like, I've played this game like 1,000 hours, and this is the first time I've seen a gun that performs this way, with this combination. It's mind-boggling. It's cool. I love that element of it.
Hello and welcome to the Game Developer Podcast. I'm your host, Senior Editor Brian Francis. Today we are talking about Gearbox Entertainment's newest game, Borderlands 4, with creative director Graeme Timmins and global creative executive Andrew Reiner. It's the latest entry in the long-running franchise, made in part by a team of developers who've been working on the Borderlands series since the first one in the mid-2000s. Those veterans are a big reason for why the cooperative looter shooter series has gone from scrappy underdog to AAA titan without any massive overhauls or major reboots. Timmins is one of those developers. He was a lead level designer on Borderlands, which released in 2009. Reimer is a relatively newer hire at Gearbox, but as the former editor-in-chief at Game Informer, he watched the series famously make a major art direction overhaul that made it an eye-catching phenomenon. Today, we're quizzing them about what's changed for Borderlands, what they think about the evolving social play phenomenon in multiplayer games, and why they're so honest about missteps from prior games. Hope you enjoy. Andrew and Graeme, welcome to the Game Developer Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Hey.
Yeah. First off, congrats. Borderlands 4 is basically here. Not quite sure when this releases in relation to the game launch, but it's September. The game's out in September. Your journey has come to an end. Maybe not the end, but at least an end, now that players will finally get to have their hands on it. How long have each of you been working on Borderlands 4? And I know that's a pretty broad definition, right? Because, depending on when you first enter the room and are told your Borderlands 4 is greenlit, that can mean different things. But how long have each of you been working on this game?
It's been a couple years for me. I joined back in the summer of 23. Because after Borderlands 3 launched, I also was its creative director for its live service side of the game. We always take care of our games afterwards. So I stayed on Borderlands 3. I was one of the last people to actually leave Borderlands 3. I think Borderlands 3 was like a 6-year project for me because I stayed on the longest.
Yeah, a little longer for me. I've been just over 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Am I accurate in saying that Borderlands 4 had a relatively quick development cycle? There's some other great games. Obviously, Hollow Knight Silksong is launching on the day we're recording this. So first off, thank you to both of you for talking to me today when you could be playing Silksong. But they took a long time to make that game. There's bigger games that take longer, smaller times. But it really feels like you guys sort of Gearbox turned this one out at a pretty decent pace. It feels like.
Well, I mean, we had other stuff going, right? So during the same time, we had Wonderlands was also developed and released. And so there was always a small group working on Borderlands 4 right after Borderlands 3 shipped. There was always a small group working on it. My time at Gearbox had me taking care of Borderlands 3 longer, so I stayed on that. I helped on Wonderlands briefly, and then I joined the team and got this opportunity to kind of steward it the last few years to bring it together. But yeah, Gearbox has always got a lot of stuff going on, and we always have more ambition than people, and so it's not too unusual to have people kind of shift between projects as they kind of ramp up through different stages of production.
Very good. For both of you, I kind of want to know, we were talking before the show about how I still remember the very first Borderlands Game Informer cover, how that, showed off this big change in the visual direction for the series. When it began, we were in an era where this comedy, colorful, the legendary, shift that the series made was a big contrast to other games in the era. But today, cartoonishness, humor, over the top gameplay, this is way more common now. So how do you guys define Borderlands as standing out, and staying relevant after all these years?
I've been with the franchise since pretty much day one. I started back in Gearbox in 2005, 2006, and I was a lead level designer on Borderlands 1. And so I've kind of seen, and I've worked on all of them. I've kind of seen, its evolution over time. We've also all grown up, over that same time ourselves. And, our audience has grown and matured, and we kind of wanted to like grow along with them, right, and have the style and the tone of the game evolve over time. We're also very creative. We don't want to do the same thing all the time. We're always looking to invent and push and create. And so, project to project, we do try different things, like the tone of BL1 to BL2 did change. Like, there wasn't the strongest story in Borderlands 1, but it was this dark and gritty, dark humor kind of world. And that changed going into BL2, and then it elevated and changed again in BL3. And it's changing again for BL4. But it's not like some kind of sweeping change on our part. It's just natural as we try to, like, always be looking for creative outlets.
And first off, thanks for bringing up the Game Informer reference there. I love it. With this entry, I feel like it really kind of feels like a fresh start for the series, right? It is the technically number 4, fifth entry, whatever you want to call it. But there is just so much new in this entry. So many things that we've changed, different approaches, whether it's, opening up the world, and enhancing the move set, taking you to someplace you've never seen before, that it all just kind of smacks of something that players haven't experienced in Borderlands yet. Yet the familiar elements are still there. But I do think this is a great jumping on point for players. And I think it, to answer your question outright, I think it hits that note of like, hey, this is something new. This is something next gen. This is the next level of Borderlands.
Yeah. My spouse and I sometimes talk about how like this console generation's felt a little like, slow to sort of explain what's new and next about it. And Borderlands, being such a long running series is such a good like measuring stick for like, okay, what truly has changed generation to generation, starting with like that Xbox 360, that PlayStation 3 era. And now, here we are, Xbox Series XS, PlayStation 5. Like you guys, have really, especially Graeme getting to be there for so long, you guys have got to see the tools and tech evolve and bring Borderlands along with it.
Yeah, I mean, I've been telling the story a bit this week, but originally during the prototyping of Borderlands 1, when it was just Project Willow, we didn't know what it was. We wanted to do a seamless world. We tried doing that in UE3 with the streaming, capabilities of the engine at that time, but they weren't there for what we wanted to do, because our ambition is always so great, like I was saying. And so we've always wanted to do a seamless world. And, as lead level designer on that project, we still tried to do a pseudo open world with these hubs and spokes. And we always tried to make sure that the world did feel connected and consistent. And so when you went from one place to another, you could look back in the skybox and see where you came from. So we've always wanted to do this. But with UE5 and the new hardware, we could finally execute this idea that we had, over a decade ago that we really wanted to do. And so we definitely like dove in as like a priority of making a seamless world without the interruptions of loading screens. That was like a big deal to us. And I think, and also not just make it big for the sake of being big. We wanted to also cram the world full of content.
Yeah, like a world can be seamless without being aping a real city or a whole planet or whatever. Like I'm sort of thinking of even smaller games like Sandwich Caravan, where it sort of just matters that you can go anywhere without a loading screen more than the overall scope of the world, right? Like it's really interesting how this discipline has evolved to be the open world design discipline is no longer just about like what's the biggest place we can make, but like what's the biggest relevant place we can make. And it's really cool that you guys, got to sort of take a swing at it.
Yeah.
Andrew, coming in, speaking of technical stuff, something I think is interesting for those of us in the writing world as we wander into the bowels of game development is that we are some of the ones who have to learn very fast about what technical limitations or even opportunities and how they intersect with whatever creative vision we have. Like in your role as chief creative officer, I really hope I really hope I said that correctly. Chief
global creative executive officer. It's a mouthful.
Like, as soon as I said it, I was like, that's not correct. And I was like, nope, but we're live. We have to commit to the failure. Andrew, what is your relationship to the technology, I guess, when working on a game like this? Is the cleanest way I can ask the question, having bumbled into
I'll say this, I'm still learning things as I go along. Graeme probably hates it when I write them. I'm like, how do I do this in the debug menu? But, it's, from the moment I started, it was like, oh, imposter syndrome. I don't know anything about this. But you quickly learn like that your skill set as, a game journalist, a game writer is totally valid in the game development space and is needed and is, used daily. Like the things that I know, people are picking my brain all the time about things. But it's, I've adapted. I've learned as time went on, and I feel pretty competent now. Graeme might think otherwise, but I'm not in there developing anything. I'm not doing any code, but I could get around the game pretty well and figure things out, send data that the team needs.
Graeme, do you have a story about when Andrew actually like sent you something on this technical side and you were like, wait, how did he see that? How did he get that? That's supposed to be our job.
I mean, Andrew's experience and just breadth of knowledge when it comes to games, that's the value, right? And through, my minor in school was journalism. At a time, I also thought I was going to be a journalist. And, Andrew's ability to communicate an idea concisely is so important in game development. I found that myself as, my major back in school was like information technology. And I always say I never use that, but I use my journalism minor every day because as a game designer, you have to formulate your ideas, organize them, and then be able to express them to your teams, and excite your teams and rally the teams. And so I think Andrew's way of explaining hey, the game could really use this and this is why and this is the emotion that I'm feeling and that I think we could achieve if we did this thing. And the example we use is there's a bunch of bobbleheads in the game for Marcus, and Andrew was running around and saying I'm really missing one more thing and I want to collect this and I want to do this. And I was able to take that idea and I was able to interpret it and say, okay, I can do this really quickly because this was very late in development and get this into the game. They're a really fun addition to the game. You'll be just wandering around and just randomly find a little bobblehead and a little scene around it. And where you think it's like a nowhereville, like an area we didn't complete. And no, it's like, nope, we knew you could get here and Andrew helped us figure that out and get it into the game.
Yeah. Is this kind of a feature where you're also as just in terms of designing for player discovery, is this sort of like how other games will drop these bobbleheads in? I'm pretty sure I'm thinking of the Fallout, Bethesda's Fallout games where it's not just the bobblehead, but there might be a little scene around the bobblehead. Maybe it's placed on an altar or something. Are we sort of talking in that range?
Yeah, basically. They're not, I always make it clear too, though, they are not a collectible. You do not have to get them all. We're not going to make you scour every square inch of our massive world to find them. But yeah, they tell a little story typically or have a little humor and some, environmental storytelling around them. But just give you a quick little, giggle at most, usually, that you found it and you saw something pretty humorous.
Yeah. Other times you'll find them you'll launch off a silo, the zip line, and you'll be gliding around and you'll be like, oh, I wonder if I can hit that water tower. And it's you got to have the perfect glide to do it. And you get up there and then, there's a bobblehead there, of course. So that's kind of a reward for that effort that you put forth that doesn't really lead to anything other than, hey, I achieved that, but we have that bobblehead. Yeah. I got to point out, by the way, this Marcus bobblehead here, after we got him in the game, someone on the team gave that to me. They're like, you're the bobblehead guy. Oh. And I was like, I don't know if I want to be that guy at Gearbox, but I appreciate it.
For the podcast listeners, Andrew was pointing to a bobblehead sitting above a psycho mask. sitting on this beautiful wall of shelves with other great props from the Borderlands series. We've been talking about, it's funny because you've kind of mentioned a couple times, Graham, both having an open world that is meaningful in the right size, that feels worthwhile and not just big for big's sake. You've sort of alluded there, you want the bobbleheads to be like a fun reward, not something that feels obligatory or something that can be a grind, is what I'm hearing correctly. And I was reading some of the other comments you've made, like say in this issue of Game Informer, the first ever one back, with the cover story of Borderlands 4, holding up again for the podcast listeners, doing a little prop, not even comedy here, just prop stuff with the physical issue. You guys have talked about like removing friction from some of the Borderlands experience, and I was sort of specifically thinking about changing how quest turn-ins work, right? Like there's the classic, like you go out, you do something, you come back, you turn in the quest, and for better or worse, that is definitely a level of friction. So like, how did you guys assess where removing that friction was appropriate and where it needed to stay there for like the sake of the player experience, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, one of our, we've been using the term a lot is seamless. We wanted to create the seamless world, and seamless was such a great word because it could also, speak to so many other things. And like mission progression is feeling seamless, character progression feeling seamless. And so when it came to missions, we wanted to not, always have the like return back to the person you talk to. And there's still times you'll do that in the game because there's narrative reasons and conceit that we need you to be in a place to like see the next thing or hear the next thing. But there are a lot of missions where you just complete it, and we now have we call it our reward center, where the mission completes wherever you're at, and the reward is put in the reward center. And you can just get it on the go. You don't have to like interrupt what you were doing to just go get that piece of gear that's like waiting for you, right? You just bring up your back menu and go into your inventory, and it's there waiting for you to open. It also doesn't like come up with a big like pause on the screen. You could be mid combat and complete a mission or a contract, and as soon as you're done, you can go in there when you've got a minute. So we are always trying to think about how can we remove those interruptions from the player experience so that there's like not an excuse to put the controller down.
Yeah, that's I always appreciate those. Sort of mentioned caravan sandwich before, but just that sense of like what happens when I don't notice that something is in my way, I guess. When does it feel natural to go to a place? When do I want to? I mean, it's a moving target for sure. Um what under the hood? We've talked about the seamless world, this going from place to place. What under the hood technically is another big advancement for Borderlands that you guys like are proud of, but it's not as easy necessarily to talk about?
Well, I'll say that, we're a Unreal house at this point. We've been great partners with Epic, and they've been great partners
Mm-hmm.
with us over many, many years now. But we've also created a lot of bespoke tools over the course of Borderlands through Borderlands 4 now that we revived, that we've taken from game to game and improved, where how we're spawning enemies into the world, how interactive objects are built and managed, to our weapon system, our enemies. We have a lot of bespoke tools that are all data driven, that allow designers to do so much. We For the types of games that we make, Blueprint isn't the best solution because of how Blueprint works versus how our world wants to work and how our characters work and all our guns and for memory. So we've got a lot of stuff under the hood that allows us to do the seamless world, have stuff seamlessly stream in and out as necessary, and let us create this really massive world that you can explore in co-op, and you can have one buddy on one side of an open zone and like the fade fields, and one completely on the other, and there's no tethering. We only pull you together when you have to like
Mm-hmm.
change biomes. So there's a lot of technology. And then I'll just say on the art side, speaking for Adam May, our art director, Unreal's Lumen has allowed us to really up our lighting, and really make the world feel and like have such atmospherics, that we just haven't been able to achieve before. And then, Epic's also got Nanite, so it really lets us up our fidelity in terms of the meshes significantly. So,
Mhm.
UE5 gave us a really fantastic base to actually execute what we wanted, and then we've always layer on those tools that make Gearbox games on top of it.
I'll
Yeah.
add, this might not be under the hood. Maybe it's just barely under the hood. Maybe it's on your driver's side dash. I don't know what the comparison here is, but uh, the way we do loot, the way loot rolls out in this one, Graeme, I'll have you answer this more, but obviously we make legendaries matter again, but also we're kind of rewarding players as they hit different milestones and levels with different drops. Yeah, Graeme, jump into that a little bit.
You know, um, we're a looter shooter, and so as much as we have, we always make sure our first person shooter mechanics feel sharp and engaging. We also have all of this depth in our gear game, and so over the course of the game, as you level up, we have all of these additions to the loot drops that get kind of expressed over many levels. Like you're not actually seeing the full loot pool of what can spawn and drop until level 25, and then the like chance for getting like max rolls also doesn't cap until you're at the end of the game. And so we have a lot of stuff under the hood that allows us to tweak and manage by level, by so many attributes. It's almost mind-numbing. But all of
Yeah.
that stuff allows us to find that magic that makes for a really satisfying action RPG where loot matters again. And when you see something legendary, it's, a rewarding moment. Just seeing the beam itself, you're like, holy shit, right? We got that back. And,
Yeah.
I'm very thankful to our engineers to have helped us develop our tool set that let us, always have this magic.
Yeah, in plenty of games, and I'm sort of, especially coming through. If I'm thinking about like free to play mobile games I've tried out, like sort of Legendary does not necessarily always feel like how it did when I was playing. My first encounter with it was World of Warcraft, and the idea of seeing it from some of the drops in that world before you were hitting, the 40-person raids tells you when I was playing. Um, yeah, like it's sort of easy for a game to like say it's the highest tier thing, and then but then the highest tier can become the baseline if it's needed for an activity. When it comes to managing those large loot tables for you guys, I have a Slack bot in our team Slack channel that when it says Borderlands, the word 10 million guns pops out, and I'm like, is that number too low now? Andrew's nodding. Andrew's nodding that
That's
it's too
nothing.
low. I have to go update that. That's nothing. Um, but yeah, it sort of means you get to that number, by having like a lot of granular, shifts, and then not just on the. At least I'm thinking on the stat side for the moment. I haven't even approached the 3D model side. But I guess it's funny because like the first question that comes to mind, it's easy to ask how do you make it feel different or rewarding. But I think the more interesting question for our readers is when you're designing a system like that, how do you manage it? How do you in a long-term view refine it and iterate it in a way that doesn't become overscoped or without losing your mind on it? Because I imagine at some point you're moving that slider back and forth and you're just like, I don't even know what's happening anymore.
Yeah, it's easy for us to overscope. I'll say that. Like when it comes to the gear, specifically, we put a lot of investment there because it is like our loop. It's like it's got to be good. It's got to be great. And yes, numbers can change, and that makes a different gun for sure. But this time around, more than anything, with our license behavior system, guns can spawn with multiple manufacturer behaviors. So not just the numbers in terms
Mhm.
of accuracy and damage and rate of fire change, but actual behavior of how the weapon feels and acts when you're shooting an enemy also changes. So now this time around the guns really do feel different gun to gun that you pick up every time. Like I can honestly say I haven't picked up a gun that feels the same. There's always some
Yeah.
element that's different. And so, we have a great gear team that's led by Grant Cow and Andrew Lynch and Jonathan Crothers, and a lot of people contributed on the data side, and an amazing army of artists. Like this time around, every weapon type has its own parts. So, like a Molly one sniper rifle, I think is made up of 50 different pieces of art that can kind of get put on there in different combinations. So like not only do they feel different, but our art team went above and beyond and made sure that every element is also unique to that specific weapon. So I think like I said, every weapon this time around does feel unique, and it's our tools and expertise of doing this for so long that has led us to increase the scope without tearing out our hair. Just by this very close to tearing out our hair, but never quite there. And I think people are going to really enjoy the loot chase this time around as a result.
To point out for the audio listeners that all three of us on the call don't have much hair to tear out. Not because any of us are balding,
Well,
but
I
just
am.
we all have pretty short
Well, I
hair.
am.
Oh, all right. Well, Andrew's
Well,
balding.
past tense. It happened many moons ago. Yeah.
You're wearing, in my defense, you're wearing a hat, so I could not visually identify that from here. Not there's anything
No,
wrong with balding.
no.
To be clear, Patrick Stewart, one of our kings.
Yeah.
Lance Reddick, another one of our kings, R.I.P. Kind of on. Oh man, there was something in there. Yeah, you talked about the loot system, the gun system this time around. You've always had Borderlands has always had this really unique way of divvying up the kinds of guns, not just by type, but by the, as you said, the manufacturer, right? Like in universe, there are these different companies. They've actually evolved into the game narrative in different ways. Even Tales from the Borderlands from Telltale, explored Hyperion, I'm pretty sure. And it's just been a great like seed point for so many things in these games. I am trying to find the question mark at the end of this, as readers know I want to do. But I guess, like, how did that come about to sort of realize, like, hey, we want to make things more modular, and we've actually got, like, a pretty organic way to introduce players to it, I guess. Like, it seems like you have to find some way to introduce players to the idea of why these things are more modular, and just having, this existing corporate framework, in-universe corporate framework to work with seems like a natural fit. How did that come about?
I think that's just been kind of a natural extension. We started in Borderlands 1, and we knew that we wanted to make sure that guns did feel different. So we started to, craft these brands as a way to like encompassing a behavior. And, as you said, every game since has started to really like tie into that. And there's also a lot of themes in terms of like capitalism and the world of the Borderlands being so driven by capitalistic greed. And, because that's an easy idea unfortunately, an easy idea for our audience to grok nowadays, right?
Yeah. Oof.
Yeah. But, and so through that, we've explored what they bring to the table as terms of manufacture and how that's expressed as a behavior. And so, like you said, we've had Hyperion as a major theme. In Borderlands 3, you get to see Atlas and Molly one and speak to Jacobs as well. But what's great there is they give us a lot of place to play narratively, but we also express some of the behavior types through the actual mantras of those manufacturers. And so the example that we have for Borderlands 4 is we have a new manufacturer called the Order, clearly named after our enemies, where it's a charge and release, and that's all about having that sense of control. And the assault rifles are like they're like DMRs. You like charge them up, and then they're super precise, super accurate, and it's all about having control over your weapon. And that speaks to the themes of that manufacturer and of the story of the Timekeeper wanting to control this populace of Kairos. So we look at the manufacturers as a great place to like encompass an idea of a weapon behavior or firing style or effect, but then we also try to think about how can we take that idea and express it narratively, and that just makes both ideas stronger when you can feel the story, like when you're firing a weapon, right? So that's always been a thing. Andrew, you've been playing with a bunch of the different gear recently. I don't know if there's one that's sticking out to you.
Oh, I'll just add first before I answer that. I also like how, as a player, like when I see a loot explosion, a boss explodes, and there's loot everywhere, I know that 3 Jacobs guns dropped just from the visual of it. Like the personality of these manufacturers translates over into the loot drops themselves. So, just visually, well, I'm not going to pick that one up. That's not the type I like. But I love Jacobs. To answer your question, Grant, I think Jacobs feels wonderful this time around. Ripper, which is kind of the opposite of the order, which you just let loose. You just hold that button down and it just shreds, is fantastic. I think all of our manufacturers, there's a lot. And the mixing and matching of some of these, outside of the manufacturers that we have as dedicated loot drops, we have other manufacturers like Children of the Vault coming back for some of those attachments, Atlas, stuff like that you'll see that can give the epic guns a little bit, epic and above, a little bit more of a kick.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always admired how, from my side, my experience at least, it's the ability to even notice the different changes in manufacturers, I think only came because I kept playing Borderlands games, and I just sort of began noticing an affinity. And I love how the system doesn't necessarily yell and scream at you in the face, because there's a lot of things in Borderlands yelling and screaming you in the face. But the system just sort of casually invites you to say hey, what do you like playing? And you find yourself drifting to that thing, and you sort of organically find your way into the system. And I think there's just it's funny because I think if our listeners, if I turn my chair around and sit over at Jonathan Frakes style, I sort of go, hey, I think there's a lot of way to explore that idea, and you don't necessarily need companies. You don't need companies or necessarily fully integrated world building to even start to try and do that with your players. And I feel it's a little, you guys have a complete lock on it, and it's really cool. And I'm man, I would love to experience that sensation in more games, I guess.
And I'll say this too, I'm continually surprised by our loot. I'm doing a complete playthrough right now, 100% playthrough of the game.
Yeah.
I played this game 1,000 hours. No, I love it. We have a great game on our hands, but that's a different thing. But yeah. I'll pick up, a new gun and fire it. And I'll be like, whoa, I haven't seen that effect yet. And then I think about that. I've played this game 1,000 hours, and this is the first time I've seen a gun that performs this way, with this combination. It's mind-boggling. It's cool. I love that element of it.
Yeah. Pivoting to kind of another end of the design of Borderlands. Earlier you alluded to, in this big open world, players can be very far apart as long as they're in the same biome. Borderlands has, from the beginning, been a very social game. It's social co-op, it's PvE. It's about as much about hanging out with your friends, or in my case, your significant other. It's literally one of the Borderlands 2. Playing Borderlands 2 with my spouse is one of the first activities online that we did while we were I almost said we were dating remote, but we were dating long distance. The whole language of the pandemic has changed some of these things. But yeah, when we were dating long distance, we were playing a lot of Borderlands 2 together, and it just felt social. And now social is the word on everyone's lips when they're talking about, what's hot in games, right? You have Peak, Lethal Company. This genre sort of bubbled up towards the end of your development cycle, but I guess what have you guys been observing out there in the world about social gameplay and about new ways that people just want to kind of hang out and mess around in these game worlds? What do you think you're seeing in there that really makes you interested and excited in what can be done with this kind of space?
And we've always cared about co-op, like you said. Early on, we made that decision, and I think Borderlands 4, we've continued to kind of be that torchbearer for it, because developing for co-op is hard. I'll say there's a lot of technical things. When I think about social is one of our keywords. I had 5 keywords for the game for the team, and social is one. And I think it's because games are more fun when you get to share it with someone else, and you get to react to what their reaction is to what they're seeing, and you get to hear what their experience is, and it makes it more personal. And you create these memories. So many people have these memories of playing whatever the game may be together, right? I still vividly remember way back in the day during Battlefield 2's technical beta on Isle of Man, maybe, I don't know, but a bunch of guys and I were in the office playing together, and we got in the helo with the Black Hawk and went over and disabled a bunch of the enemy's cannons and flew off. You can have really poignant story moments in solo games that you can appreciate individually, but there's this whole other side of social where you create these moments that you share with your friends that just can stick to your heart more than anything. And I think we've recognized that at Gearbox, and we we always want to provide that, be it like online multiplayer co-op or just couch co-op, because those are the types
Yeah.
of things that you kind of carry with you. You just said, with your spouse, you shared that, and that obviously has a moment in time that you cherish. And I think co-op games are distinctly capable of that.
Yeah. I haven't stopped playing. I still have my Game Informer chops of playing everything out there. So my game group, we're picking away at every multiplayer game that we can. Right now, we're playing like Phasmophobia, stuff like that. Where we're
Yeah.
a tight knit group. The thing I love about Borderlands 4's approach to co-op is when you go in, yeah, we're going to be together. We're going to be doing these things together. But given the nature of our seamless world in this one, you don't have to. You could just be together, be talking online with each other, but be off doing your own thing. And it was funny. The first time we
Yeah.
recognized this, Graeme called us in to do a play session, and he wanted us to look at the specific content. But we all started getting distracted by different things on our own. And before you know it, like we're 2 hours into this play session, we're all laughing, having a good time, but we're all like across the world, away from each other. And then Graham's like, "Hey, come over here to this one point," and we just all went to the map, instantly fast traveled to Graham, and we were together again. So you kind of get two different elements of cooperative play in this one that we didn't really have before.
Yeah, it's kind of the opposite of like what's driving this new trend, right? Like the new trend is sort of at the core, but I think the core define there's two, maybe three core defining features about it. I got to be careful. I'll hit to four. The two I'll skip over are, like what people call peacocking, like getting cool stuff that you're showing up with your friends, which you guys have to do with the loot. There's oh god, what was number two? Number two is run away from me, but the number one is proximity voice chat, right? And you guys aren't there with this one, but like you mentioned, Phasmophobia, like what makes Phasmophobia scary is proximity. But then there's the opposite, which is you're in your group voice call on your platform of choice, and you're off messing around. It's almost like how it felt sometimes in like the old I mentioned my World of Warcraft days before, but like when you were just like messaging with your guild
That's
while
exactly
you're off doing the farming you need to do.
That's exactly it. Yeah, we kind of hit on both of those notes in this one. And we're also looking at loot, like as you're playing the game cooperatively, like, hey, if I get something, I could drop it for Graham. Like, hey, I know you're into this type of grenade. Do you want this one? And he could pick it up then. So that's a big part of our end game as well, is kind of a focus on co-op play and making sure that everybody's getting the loot they need.
Yeah. Yeah, I was watching the trailer and I was kind of like, I was sort of excited for eventually a chance to, looking at some of the larger, like what looks like boss encounters in there, and just sort of going like, wow, I don't remember Borderlands, or I knew, Borderlands has always had, like from the first one with the creature that comes out of the vault, varying levels of like huge monsters and larger set pieces, but it sort of feels like, that's sort of like, oh wow, I didn't know how, like, being with people and seeing an encounter like that escalate and go, wait a minute, I thought like we were only in this small a space and now it's getting bigger, and sort of your friends spreading out, like that's also part of, like, it's this specific kind of, we're in a small space, but that space is expanding and now we're all doing different things in it. That seems like another like creative canvas to play on when you're designing encounters for this game.
Yeah, we really made a conscious effort to level up our boss experience. And, we had a whole team dedicated to that very early, because bosses are hard. They're very difficult to do. They're so technically demanding in terms of animations, effects, audio, just the feel, how the attacks impact players, how they react to the players. So they're like a very complex beast. And when you got upwards of four people in that same arena with you, the complexities of making an engaging and rewarding boss is up there. So we definitely invested in that this time around. And previous games, as you said, like we've had some big boss fights before. But this time around, we also test you in terms of mobility. In Borderlands 4, we've added a whole suite of traversal mechanics, and new ways to interact with the world. So we have like a grapple hook, can double jump and glide and dash, dodge around. And so now these big bosses, you're going to have to use these other things besides just using your action skills in your gear. You're going to also have to use this traversal mechanics to like avoid attacks in a way that we really never had before in Borderlands. And so, they're a little tougher as a result. There's some timing there that you're going to have to start to recognize, and some patterns so that you'll start to recognize. But thankfully in co-op, you can revive your buddies, and as long as someone's still fighting the boss, even if you don't get second wind, right? You don't kill an enemy when you're in downstate and you respawn back to the checkpoint. As long as someone's still in that boss arena killing something, attempting, you can just jump right back in. So in co-op,
Yeah.
you get some pluses as playing in co-op. Is yes, you're fighting a harder boss and the enemies are doing more damage, but you can kind of like still respawn and get right back into the fight. So we're not the difficulty is more challenging, but it's never punishing. And in co-op, you always feel like you can keep at something together as a group, and you'll succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of thinking about the long arc of Borderlands, if you will, which, given the tone of Borderlands, is almost like too solemn a thing to say, because I think the world is so joyful and alive that it doesn't really sort of ask to be treated in a very serious way, even while it still explores and expands itself. Uh, Come on, I knew where that question was going. Okay, yes. I thought it was interesting reading some of the commentary you guys, were sharing with, my fellow press folks about the differences between this game and Borderlands 3. Like, when I was playing Borderlands 3, I was having a great time with it, but I sort of agreed with some of the sentences, that you guys, Sam Wickler, were sort of talking about, with sometimes the humor was too referential, sometimes the tone wasn't in the right place. I was sort of struck by that candor. Like, what makes you guys want to be public about something like that? Because I talked to a lot of game devs, and game devs are the first, like, internally to be, like, brutally honest with their work. And then even after the PR cycle's done, they're, like, a little reluctant to talk about what they thought they could have done better. Some are transparent about it, but others aren't. So, like, what makes you guys want to, like, sort of be out there reflecting on that kind of experience when you're talking about the game like this to players?
We have a very good relationship with our community. We're very thankful for our community. Not every game gets to
Mm-hmm.
have the life of like Borderlands has had, and a lot of that is dependent on our community and our fans and our audience. And so we listen and take their critique very seriously. We also want to express to them like there's not a single decision that is made that isn't like so seriously considered when our game is so systems driven. Whenever we make a decision, we have to think of the like massive list of impacts that one decision would have in our systems driven game. And so we want to like also express like what on the surface may look like a simple feature or a simple reaction to something. It's actually been thought through a lens of many, many other issues that have to also like have a good solution to as part of this solution. And so when I like to kind of express some of that and kind of clue in our community and some of the decision making, so they have a better understanding. I think our industry from the outside can look very obtuse. It can look very like how does this all come together? We're working on these massive teams, but yet the how's it's done is not very well described like other industries. And so I try to giving that because it's very complex. It's not something you can just boil down into a simple conversation typically. Um, so I
Yeah.
think we have, and Randy, Randy is also very engaged with our community and likes to speak to them directly because Randy feels like he's a gamer. Randy he just thinks and
Mhm.
believes, and he is a gamer, and he wants to share the same kind of commentary that he sees in that discourse. He wants to be involved in that and be part of that. And so that's kind of made Gearbox as a whole let us be a little more expressive with our community, try to pull them in because they've pulled Gearbox and they've pulled Borderlands so much into their life. We want to show that same kind of admiration.
Yeah. I think if I recall Randy's contributions, there was something about price points, right? Do I recall something about price points? Um, Andrew. This is a little like also something I'm curious to hear from you
Mhm.
about, since you, like me, have an experience of trying to weasel these answers out of people from your Game Informer days. Like, what's it like on your side? Like finding the balance of candor, I guess.
Yeah, I think part of it is also just foundationally what Borderlands 4 is. Thematically, when you have someone like the Timekeeper and a world in control, it's a little more subdued just out of the gates, right? Without any feedback from anyone else, you have a very different tone that's kind of being struck as you're going through. So, what is the the content that should be accompanying that, right? So that's something the team was thinking about. Obviously, it's still Borderlands at its core, so we want that humor, we want that goofiness, and we have that. You
Yeah.
go out of your way, you find it. Sometimes it'll be right in your front of your face. Someone yelling at you about something, and you're like, "Oh man, this guy says Kairos is a flat planet. I disagree with that. I think it's round. Let's hash this out." That's a side mission that it's a bit of a spoiler, but it's amazing.
Yeah.
But I think that's part of it. Also, it's like I played through the game. We all played through the game after it came out and had our own feelings. We're the teams that put it together, but at the same time, we're all different. We all have different takes, and some of us agreed on certain points. Like, yeah, combat would get a little chatty at times. Like, I want to focus on combat, but the dialogue's still going. So that was something we consciously would look at, right? Like, let's not step on the combat moments. Let's try to pace out where some of this dialogue is landing. Just little, like Graeme said, just little discussions like that as we're making the game. Like, how can we enhance this? How can we make it better than we did the last time?
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of Randy, not to dive too into Randy, I promise. Gearbox and Borderlands have benefited from folks like you, Graeme, being at the company for a long time. And there's sort of a one of those hair pulling things in game development, to speak of hair pulling again, is like the challenge of trying to keep a staff at the same company, whether it's layoffs that can cause trouble at, that are out there, especially in the last couple of years, and damaging retention, the like lost institutional knowledge, to just like folks wanting to go off somewhere else. There's generally a consensus that like our industry can do better at preserving that. At the same time, new folks come in. There's not only a young generation, but folks making jumps across fields to try and move into games. What do you, with your time at Gearbox, Graeme, what do you sort of have been surprised to learn from some of the newcomers to the company, I guess? Like the contrast of having a studio where there's so many, old hands, but there's also, new folks with cool ideas or just like good energy coming in. Like, does anything stand out to you there?
I mean, I'd say it's made me appreciate our culture. I think Gearbox's culture is pretty unique. Even as we've grown, we still have a very kind of independent studio vibe, still to this day, of he who built it wins, and you can have many hats. And as we've had people join Gearbox, it's clear that not every place has that same mentality, and that makes sense. Some projects are so massive, you can't just have everyone doing everything kind of in all directions. That wouldn't be good for production, and we understand that. But thankfully at Gearbox, we've tried to foster this culture of like, the good idea should win. It might have to go through some right channels, but ultimately, you have a good idea no matter where you are in the hierarchy. A good idea is a good idea, and we should respect that and do everything we can to make that into the game. And not every place has that. And so, when it comes to retention, we've had people leave Gearbox and also come back. I think it's pretty unique that we've had people who like, maybe the grass is greener somewhere, or it's a better match for me somewhere else. And then, a year later, they're like, well, actually, Gearbox is pretty great. I want to come back. And that, I think that's pretty unique to Gearbox, and I'm very proud of that. Also, though, we're always wanting to learn. And so as we've had new voices come into Gearbox, we're always, we want them to be critical about our games, what's worked for them in the past and what hasn't, and then try to make sure to always interpret that information and what makes sense for Borderlands, what makes sense for Gearbox. But yeah, it has definitely been tough out there for the industry. I think Gearbox, thankfully, has been very fortunate to kind of not been in those same positions. And I think Randy, cares deeply for his employees and the people here and wants to be successful. Randy wants to entertain the world, and he knows he has to do that by keeping the best talent here. So he and Steve Jones have done a lot of work to make sure that that culture and that respect is felt inside the studio.
Yeah. I have a rant in me that I sometimes let get to out, which is like, it's great, which is companies sometimes don't and this is in a lot of fields, actually, is what I strongly feel about, is that, like, sometimes if you lose sight of, like, the fact that you are a company that makes products and what the product is, even if it's, in this case, it's more abstract, like entertainment, like, you can create situations where, you set yourself up for moments like the one where our industry is facing. And hearing, Randy, it's easy to say, I want to entertain the world, but how you bring that down to the rest of the studio, it sounds like that's had a very positive influence downstream.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. You guys, this chat, have done a wonderful job shouting at your colleagues. As we've discussed the many different wonderful facets of Borderlands 4. But here on the Game Developer Podcast, I've always been like intrigued by the idea of having a rare moment, especially for our professional readers, to give shout outs to people who don't necessarily have ownership over things, or they play a role in the studio that's like smaller, or that's smaller from the outside, but really important inside. Do each of you have someone else at the company you'd like to give a shout out to? And I will low key preempt the response I've gotten from many of our listeners, which is they're like, oh, there's so many people. I want to give a shout out to anyone. How could I pick just one? And I sort of got to be like, well, time is finite. There's a timekeeper in your guys' game. I have to play the role of timekeeper here, control some order. I really, honestly, I just think I would just love to give you guys a chance to give a shout out to someone who doesn't, get to play in these press interviews and such.
You go first.
I wanted to call out Graeme, but he's here. Yeah, for welcoming into the world with open arms. I mean, that was huge. But yeah, he just made me feel so welcome. But Lynn Joyce on our narrative side, the number of plates she's spinning at any given time with all the side missions and DLC and pickups and the voice actors, all that stuff. Also, Jason Reese on our mission side, right? Like putting all that together, just making it flow. I mean, everyone on the team is absolutely incredible, but those are two that come to mind that I would work with often as the project would go along.
There's a lot of people that I work with every day, so like narrowing it down is tough. But I'll say like Larry Shen is a game designer. He did a lot of heavy lifting with our interactive objects, and I worked with him a lot on like the feedback of using things. He's such a go-getter. And we've also had a couple new hires over the course of this project that were junior that really stepped up. Ronald Wang and Emily Zhang, the two of them both like picked up really complex systems work as very young designers new to the industry and have really excelled. And I think literally there's a million other names I could throw out, but those are the ones that kind of jumped out as like, hey, those guys did went above and beyond what they needed to, and a lot of us are appreciative of those kind of efforts.
Oh, Neil Johnson, by the way, on our tech side.
Tech director, and he wrangled a lot of hard stuff this time.
That's beautiful, yeah. And for the rest of the folks at Gearbox, not only do I super appreciate all the work you guys have done for Borderlands 4, but I'm sure plenty of our listeners do too. But yeah, Graeme, Andrew, thanks so much. I cannot wait to play Borderlands 4, and for the rest of the team at Gearbox, congrats on putting out another game in what has become, one of the hallmarks of sort of every console generation. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you.
Awesome. This was great. Thank you.
Thanks again to Graeme and Andrew for coming on the show. Borderlands 4 is out now on PC and consoles. And Randy, if you're listening, you should totally come by the studio. Metaphorically speaking, I record in my house. Please don't come here. For more of us at Game Developer, please sure to visit www.gamedeveloper.com, follow us on major social platforms, and subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find me on Blue Sky at brianfrancis.me. Today's episode was edited by Pierre Landriau. Our theme music is by Mike Meehan. Thanks for listening. And I wasn't kidding, by the way, that whole corporate gun system thing, go check it out. There's something other games can do with it. I just know there is. Wait, what are you doing? I'm totally a great ideas guy. Wait, come back. Bye.